Okay. So we are discussing the woman as other. Yep. So, what is the first question? Let me find it on the drive.
So this discussion is centered on the reading that we had for our last assignment. And the last assignment that we had is it's called The Other, or The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir. And his reading.
It's a girl.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, her reading. Sorry. Wait, just testing these guys. So the reading, she's discussing in a reading about how women are treated as, she's arguing that they're treated as other, and they're categorized as being less than men, and she talks about how historically they've been viewed as lesser and viewed as the other gender or the other sex. So we're just we have all the questions that pulled up here, and then we're just gonna discuss these questions, use some quotes from the text, and then we'll refer to a movie clip as well as we discuss these questions. So the first question says, in what way are women either constructed as the other or not constructed as the other? So do you guys have any thoughts about that?
What's the first question?
So in what ways are women constructed as the other or not constructed as the other? So we answered this in our last assignment.
What way? So how are they like categorized as the other, or how are they kind of like, what's the word, downgraded from men? Yeah.
Yeah, so at least from what I read, the one quote that I can think of is they talked about how women are relative to men. Women, yeah, I put that in my assignment. How women they are seen as what they can do for men. So that's what they mean when they say relative to. Because they're not looked at first, but they looked at all the man can do. What can the woman do to help the man in his whatever he's doing? So that's how they are constructed as the other, because they are sometimes viewed, as the author argues, they're sometimes viewed as just being there merely to help men in the case throughout history, and they refer to different historical times in the article that we read, even back to the time of Adam and Eve. So I think they talk about that in the article as well. So basically, they are referred to as the other, or constructed as the other. The text says that they are looked at as relative to man, so they are seen as less than. They're seen as relative to. So what can they do to support the men?
Yep, true. What I was kind of talking about in my assignment is that they kind of like share both sides. Like they say how men are like dominant and how like they don't really care about, not care about, but they rely on them for different reasons that are like right. But then they also give like the author, what's her name? Yeah, that sounds fun. They also say, I think it's French, but then she says how women, why is she writing a paper kind of about women? Like it's kind of ironic how she has to even ask the question, like, what is a woman? Mm-hmm. I don't really understand why she was putting that question in her writing. Like, why am I writing about this? That was kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. So I guess we can move on to the second question. There's a lot of examples in the text, and we'll probably talk about it in our write-up a little bit more. But there's many examples in the text, and if you look historically, women voting rights, women couldn't vote in most countries until the last 100 years. And there's just a lot of other examples that it's talked about. So the second question says, how are they outside or inside what is considered normal for a given society? So, what do you guys have any thoughts? How are they outside a normal society?
How they're viewed in society
Yeah.
and past and today.
I think how they like there in that questions. I feel like men will or like looking for the women they're like just relying on him, and then society just think that women are weak. Not all of the society, but some of the society they think that the work or like they only do the work and then just the women are just so weak. They don't really do like the hard workings and all the stuff. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Not really all of the society, but some of the society they think that a woman can do all the work. I don't know, but that's what I see in my society.
Um, in addition, I think the society views the relationship between men and women is like it's very poor.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, like the author said, you think doesn't so because you're a woman, but I know that my only defense is to reply. I think doesn't so because it is true.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, when they were like, I kind of talked like about how, and when they said that, I kind of quoted that, and it said, how a guy would kind of like, not an argument, but kind of a conversation with a woman, they wouldn't really have a reason to win a conversation, so to say. They kind of just end the conversation with because I said so, or because I don't know, for no reason. They don't really resolve it. They don't really have to listen to what the woman has to say because I don't know. Some of them don't listen just because they're a woman, or don't think they have an opinion in what they're talking about in a conversation.
Yeah, I think how are they outside or inside? Yeah, so I think the text. I remember there was a paragraph about how it talked about how men have been in power in society. They've had different power roles and they occupy positions of power like in government, typically kings or leaders of armies, or I think it was maybe the second or third to last paragraph in the text. So historically, women have been outside what is considered normal for a given society. They haven't even been viewed as a part of the society. That's the problem, and that's the argument that I think make is they haven't had a proper place in society for so long, and now that they finally do, it's finally being challenged their position, and now people are finally realizing how much they've missed out on over the last thousands of years.
and it's like the men have more power than women.
Mm-hmm.
Like the man is always right in being a man, and women is always wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then I talked a lot about how society today, that women are kind of like used by men just for like reproduction or like sex, just for like one time, or something just like along those lines, and then they don't really care about them. They're kind of like being used as like objects, and they're not really like seen as a person. They're seen as something that can be used.
Because I think there's something in the story, like they were talking about that the moment the woman goes a lot of disappointment in the society.
Mm-hmm.
There's some, I don't know, like which character and what line, where like she mentioned about it that some of the people think that moment was a lot of disappointment in the society.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like they always leave the problem unresolved. Like, for example, if we have something that we're not agree with, and we'll just say, because I said so, and we're all quiet with no opinions, okay?
Oh,
Just an example.
so that means that like the men think they're like they have the power and they can do whatever they wanted, whatever things that come into their minds. That's the reason, and that's the decision.
Yeah.
I know.
Some society have that situation.
Yeah.
Right? Like the men, they just think whatever decision they can do is just the right decision to go for.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the women have some ideas and some thoughts for it, but like
You have no right.
Yeah, that kind of ties in with our next question as well. It's like, it says, how are they seen as representing that society or not representing it or being foreign to it? We've already kind of discussed it, as how women have been powerless in society, in a lot of different societies. We've kind of discussed what their position is in society. Just an example from the top of my mind. So New Zealand was the first country to give women voting rights, 1893, September 19th.
Oh.
And
Wow.
and we were the first country, but that was only 120 years ago. Yeah, I don't know why I looked at my watch. But that was only 120 years ago. So that's only like 4 or 5 generations where women have even been able to vote for who they want in power. They've been foreign to society before that for thousands of years, and they've had no representation at all. They've had no politicians, no presidents, no prime ministers in any countries until the last like 50 years. And again, the text was talking about that in the last couple of paragraphs, how they have not had much power, and it's kind of been a male-dominated society.
wow, I didn't know that. No, I didn't know that. There's something
Yeah.
like that.
I can't even think of stuff in America. I know that we didn't have voting rights, but I don't know when.
What about chocolate?
Came back. There's women in like the Supreme Court now. It's cool. And then running for president. That was almost a thing.
I didn't even think of any of the fun.
You want to talk about the movie clip?
Yeah. So what's really? Yeah.
It's about her name.
Owen. So lastly, how do your examples from your movie to the reading? The movie is things. The movie that I saw recently, and I was observing one of the characters called Owen, and her role in the movie is like very limited, mainly because she's a woman. So like when she's first introduced into the movie, all they focus on is like her beauty. They don't really care about like her characteristics. But when the other male characters are first introduced, they focus more on like who they are, their skills, what they bring to the table. But she's only looked at as being someone that's beautiful. They don't really look at past the beauty. And then when they're in fights and when they're battling and stuff like that, she's only seen as how can she help the males. She's not like a leading role, leading figure in their battles. But she's more seen as how can she help the males. So again, like what we were talking about earlier, they have like limited roles. They're only seen as doing specific things to help the male.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the picture.
Right.
Beautiful
There we
girl.
go.
She is really pretty. I really like her. She's one of my favorites, except she had a really small part. But yeah, even in it keeps going in those movies too. Like even in The Hobbit, she's like that with the girl, and she just helps out here and there. But it was really focused on the males and how they, I don't know, when they're in times of need, they just pop up and they help out for a quick second, and then they leave,
Yeah.
and it's back to the boys again.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's it's a common trend in a lot of movies. Actually, you don't have to look far. But the role of women in many movies is limited, and they play more of a secondary act. But lately we have some awesome movies like Wonder Woman, where they have
I love it.
where they have a leading figure, and people really like that the main actor is a woman because it represents female empowerment. So the stereotypes and the problems of women as being other in society are definitely changing and expounding. So the text it presents a good argument, and it really highlights some key issues as to why women have been viewed as the other or the second sex throughout history. But then today, definitely in the 21st century, there's a lot of female empowerment and a lot of things that are changing.
And one that really stood out to me was in the book, The Great Gatsby. Daisy, she talks about how like if she ever like gave birth to a daughter, she'd want her to be a fool because that's all what a woman is good for. And that was back in the 1920s. So it's really sad to think how women, like, the only thing that they can do good in the society is to like just be a stupid girl, or how society views them like that.
She's so stupid.
Sorry.
That's it.
Cool. That's it.
Amen.
Lana Kareem. Wonder Woman.
Praise. All right.
Yep.
Is that it?
Ah.